I decided to sell my old desk on Craigslist. It had been lying around in my room, gathering dust, and I figured it was time to go. I took some pictures and then listed it, but after waiting for a whole week with no interest, I was starting to lose hope. Then, out of the blue, I got a message from a guy who seemed super interested on checking out the desk. We messaged back and forth for a little while, and soon I gave him my address to come and buy it. On the day of the meetup, the man showed up, and something about him felt a little off. Anyway, I welcomed him in and led him to where the desk was. The man had sort of long hair that was blondish red. He was thin and also somewhat short. He looked at the desk for a minute or two. There really wasn't much to it. It was just an old desk. But then he looked up and asked me if he could use my bathroom. I was confused at first, but I didn't want to be rude, so I pointed him in the right direction. He was in there for a little while as I waited in the living room by the desk. Then, finally, the man came back over and told me that he really had to get going. He thanked me for showing him the desk and said that he would consider it. Then he left. I was sort of confused and also disappointed. The whole encounter seemed strange, and I was really hoping that the man would have bought the desk from me. Later that day, I decided to lower the price on the desk on Craigslist in hopes that it would get more attention. That very night, though, something strange happened. I was sound asleep when I suddenly woke up to strange noises. I sat up and listened closely. The noises sounded like they were coming from down the hallway. I couldn't figure out what was causing them, and they went on for what felt like forever. After waking up a little bit, I soon realized that the noises were coming from my bathroom down the hallway. This was really strange to me, so I decided to get up and check it out. I got up from my bed and slowly walked over to my doorway. It was open a little, and I stuck my head out to look into the hallway. Just as I did that, I saw the same guy who had looked at my desk earlier. He was leaving my bathroom and starting to walk down the hallway in the opposite direction of me. I quickly ducked back into my bedroom. I was really glad that the guy hadn't seen me. Still, I was really scared, and I couldn't believe that this guy was inside my house. I shut my bedroom door and locked it. I hadn't thought to be quiet, and it made a noise much louder than I had expected. After this, I heard movement as if the man was now walking in my direction. Sure enough, his footsteps started moving closer to my bedroom. I backed up and ran to the corner of the room farthest away from the doorway, got my phone out, and called the police. In the meantime, the man tried opening my bedroom door. When he did, I started freaking out. Then he began banging on the door loudly, not as if he wanted me to let him in, but as if he was trying to break the door down. I looked around the room, but didn't really have any decent hiding places in there. I also had nothing I could really use to defend myself. As the banging continued, I worried that my door wouldn't be able to hold up. I looked to the window and decided that I would have to jump out. The bedroom was not very high above the ground, and I could make the jump to the grass pretty easily. I went to the window and started scrambling to get it open. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be because I was panicking. The bangs on my bedroom door got louder and louder. Finally, I got the window open and I jumped out onto the lawn beside my house. Then I ran down the street as quickly as I could. I didn't really know where exactly I was going, just away from there. I wound up making it to the end of the block before running out of breath. Soon I started walking, and I felt much better and was relieved to be away from there. The police arrived at my house only minutes later. I saw the flashing lights from the next street over, and I walked around. When I saw them, I carefully headed back, and when I got back to my house, I was able to see that they had caught the man who had broken in. I spoke with several officers for about an hour, recapping the whole situation. When I learned that officers had found the man in my bedroom with the door broken, I couldn't believe it. I'm really glad that I left. I'm not sure why the man broke into my house, though, and what his intentions were. I do know that he got in because he left the bathroom window open a little bit for himself when he had looked at the desk earlier. It was never really his intentions to buy it. To wrap up the story, I will let you know that I did end up selling the desk at a lower price several weeks later. I was in the market for a new car and decided to check out some options on Craigslist. After browsing through a few listings and even test driving a couple of cars that didn't quite meet my expectations, I stumbled upon one that seemed like a good deal. The ad boasted about how the car ran great and had no issues, and the price was also very reasonable. I contacted the seller, and we agreed to meet at a local park so I could take a look at the car. When I arrived at the park the next day, the man who owned the car came across as really creepy right from the start. I had a strange gut feeling about him, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. I looked around at the car from the outside and asked very basic questions. The man answered them for the most part, like how the gas mileage was and things like that. I just really wasn't sure about it though for some reason. We both stood near the car, and the man insisted on demonstrating how well it ran. He didn't offer for me to take it for a test drive though. Instead, he asked that I get in the passenger side of the back of the car and he would drive. I saw that the front passenger seat was like folded up almost, and also up against the glove compartment. The man explained that the seat had broken and was stuck that way, but it would be very easy and cheap for me to fix it. He also told me that he would let me drive, but he had once had a car stolen from him in the past and is very protective of his things. I remember him also saying he was sure I was a good person, but he had to play it safe. These things obviously came across as a little bit strange to me, but I believed both of his explanations and I got in the back. Then we took off. As soon as he started driving, I realized very fast that the car wasn't in the condition that it was advertised online. The engine made a really weird sound, and the overall performance was far from impressive. It was clear that the car was nothing more than a junker, and the guy was seeming sketchier and sketchier by the second. I was really disappointed, and I mentioned the strange noise the car was making. The man kept on driving, almost as if he was trying to prove to me that it was a decent vehicle, and he told me that the noise was nothing and to not worry about it. I started to feel uncomfortable, and I wanted the ride to end as soon as possible. He kept driving for probably 10 more minutes though. As the ride continued, I decided to speak up. I told the man that the car wasn't what I expected and I wanted to return to the park. He agreed and started to turn the car around, and I was happy for this test drive to finally be over with. But the guy didn't keep going back the way we had came. Instead, he turned off to another road that I knew wasn't right. The roads that we were on were also very quiet. I told him I really have to be somewhere, hoping that he would finally listen to me. Instead, he turned to me with a sinister grin and said, "No, you're coming with me." My heart sank as the car continued to speed along, and the fact that we were in an area that I didn't know anymore made me increasingly worried. I had no idea where we were heading. Wow, I'm being kidnapped. This is real, I thought to myself. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I had to think fast to find a way out of it. Suddenly, luck seemed to be on my side, as the car's engine started making terrible sounds, even worse than before, and then smoke started to come out of the hood. The man pulled the vehicle over to the side of the road. He was frustrated, and he locked the doors and got out to examine the engine. There was a child lock on the back seat, so I couldn't get out. If I could get up to the front seats, though, it would be possible. But the man was right there, and I probably wouldn't be able to get past him. He would see me moving to the front. I sat there for a moment as the man fumbled around with the engine. Then I noticed a truck coming up behind us on the quiet road that we were on the side of. An opportunity presented itself to me. As the truck stopped behind us, I quickly jumped into the front driver's seat and unlocked the doors. Then I jumped out and was just feet away from the man. He started to try and stop me, but I ran in the opposite direction towards the truck behind us. The guy driving the truck looked really confused, but ended up letting me in. I told him what had happened, and the police were called. Meanwhile, the man got back inside his car and tried desperately to start the engine and drive away, but the car still wouldn't start. Eventually, he ended up just getting out and running off into the woods. I sat inside the big pickup truck with the driver, watching the whole time. The police got there about 5 minutes after the guy had ran off into the woods. They were able to find him and picked him up in about 15 minutes. I'm really grateful that the truck happened to be driving by when it did, or else I don't know how I would have gotten away. As my freshman year in high school was arriving, I was an ignorant 14-year-old dreaming of having my own TV in my bedroom. I remember asking my parents many times, but they would always say the same things. They didn't have enough money, and it wasn't good for me to play video games all the time anyways. Their solution? If I wanted a TV so badly, I could buy one myself. The only problem was that I couldn't get a job because I was only 14, and I had no money. I remember searching around for jobs, but I just couldn't find anything, because you had to be 16. Then I got another idea. I realized that on Craigslist, lots of people gave away stuff for free. I started secretly going on every single night and began scouring the free listings for a TV. Figured if there was an actual working TV that was good, it would probably go pretty fast. A few weeks went by with nothing. There were a few possibilities, but they either seemed really sketchy, were too far away, or the TV was broken. Finally, at last, I found one that seemed perfect. The TV was not super big or new, but definitely good enough for me. It made me excited when I found it, and I contacted the owner immediately. I waited for the rest of the night for them to respond, but they didn't. I was worried somebody else had picked it up, but the next morning, I saw that they got back to me and told me that I could come pick it up that night if I wanted. This made me really excited, and I told them that I would. We lived in a really populated area, which meant that I could ride my bike almost all over the place. The address was only about 1.5 miles away. So that night, without telling my parents, I hooked up a wagon to the back of my bike so that I could carry the TV back. Then I set out to go pick it up. My plan was to put some bungee cords around the TV and wagon for it to be secure, and once I was home, I would show my parents. I figured that if I already had the TV home, my parents would let me keep it. I knew them pretty good, and my older sister had actually done a similar thing with a pet hamster. She didn't sneak out into the night to get it, but she had a friend who was giving away a hamster, and she came over and then they asked her, and my parents said yes. Anyways, the sun was set, and it took me about 15 minutes to get to the address that I had written down as the house. When I got there, it looked like just another house in the dense neighborhood. I parked my bike at the end of the driveway and then walked up to the front step. When I was there, I knocked at the front door, but saw that it was already open. Still, I didn't want to be rude, and I waited outside. I heard a voice coming from seemingly the back of the house. It was a man's voice, and he said something like, "Are you here for the TV?" I yelled back, "Yes." The guy said that it was his son's, and he was in the basement. He then told me to go ahead. I found it a little strange, and I never saw the person, and they never bothered to come and answer the door or greet me at all. I helped myself to walking inside, and saw that there was a basement door that was open with stairs going down. The basement was very dark and looked really creepy to me. As a 14-year-old kid, I'm not going to lie, I had a feeling of, what did I get myself into? Still, I wanted a TV, and I wanted one bad, so I pressed on. I started walking down the stairs into what appeared to be an unfinished basement. It was just so dark down there, like none of the lights were on. I wasn't really sure what to do. The stairs creaked as I walked on them, and I neared the base. When I got probably 2/3 of the way down the stairs, I heard a sudden noise in the basement. It was like somebody running, but I couldn't really see. I stopped where I was and looked around. Then, finally, I saw them. Some guy was sprinting towards me from the other side of the basement. He looked insane. I turned around and ran as fast as I could back up the stairs. When I had almost made it all the way back up, I heard the man running up the stairs behind me. I got back up to the main level of the house and then bolted out the front door. I ran all the way back to my bike and got out of there as quickly as possible. I didn't see anybody leaving the house, but I also didn't stick around very long to find out. I rode my bike with the wagon attached to it as fast as I could back home. The wagon slowed me down, but luckily I wasn't chased or anything. I got back home and told my parents everything. I thought that I was going to be in trouble, but they were surprisingly nice about it. I think they were just really glad I was okay. They went on to find the listing and reported it, and I think that they reported it to the police as well. They told me not to worry about the situation anymore. Moving forward, if I wanted to find something on Craigslist, my parents told me to let them know, and they could possibly go with me. I did end up getting a TV not too long after that. I'm a 30-year-old female, and last summer, I listed my old laptop on Craigslist. I paid over $1,000 for the laptop when I bought it brand new, and I had recently gotten a new one. The laptop was about 3 years old and it worked great. I figured I could still get a lot of money for it, and I did a little bit of research on what it was worth before listing it. This was my first time attempting to sell anything on Craigslist. I hadn't bought anything on Craigslist either, but one of my friends had several good experiences with it and recommended it to me. So I listed the laptop, and over the first few days, got no interest. I had one person asking if I would accept an offer that was far too low, but that was about it. Then, I finally seemed to get somebody that was seriously interested in it. I got a message from someone asking if the laptop was still available. I told them yes, and the person said they would like to come over and buy it. The person said his name was Tony, and he was willing to pay full price for the laptop. He said that his had recently broken, and he really needed one. We texted back and forth for a little, and ended up agreeing that Tony would come to my house to buy it the next evening. That very next morning, on what was supposed to be the day of the meeting, I saw that I had a friend request on Facebook. The request was from Tony himself. This puzzled me a bit because I hadn't given him my last name or anything like that. I went onto Tony's page to look at him, and to be honest, he really gave me the creeps. From the things he posted to how he looked, I suddenly had a bad feeling about him. I started to realize that I had invited this guy to my house, but luckily I had not given him my address yet. I decided that I no longer wanted him to come over, and I was going to tell him that I wasn't going to sell it anymore. I texted Tony and I told him that I was sorry, but something had come up and I would no longer be able to sell him the laptop. Tony responded pretty quickly, asking me why not. All I said was that something unexpected came up and I was sorry, but it just wasn't going to work out. Tony then texted me that he was still going to come over. This made me worried. I told him that he did not need to come over anymore, and after I texted that, he didn't respond. I also declined his friend request on Facebook. I hoped that he would get the message and would not ask to come over again. A few hours went by, and day turned to night, and I was feeling better about the whole situation. I had not heard from Tony at all. But at about 8 p.m., I got a text message from him. It said, "I'm here." Suddenly, I had a terrible feeling. Was he actually here? How did he know my address? I crept over to the front window and looked outside. I saw a car parked outside, on the side of the street right in front of my house. The driver's door opened, and sure enough, Tony was there and walking out. I decided to pretend that I was not home. Most of my lights in the house were off because I had been in the other room. Tony walked up to the front step and then knocked on the door. I remained where I was and did not even think about answering it. He waited and then knocked again. This went on for probably 5 minutes. I was just hoping that he would finally give up and leave. It was quiet for a while, and I was thinking about checking to see if Tony was gone, but then I felt my phone vibrate. I looked at it to see that Tony had texted me again. This time, he said, "I know that you're home. Let me in." I had no clue how he knew I was home, but I still didn't answer. Then, about a minute later, he tried calling me. After I didn't answer his phone call, he started pounding on the front door. Finally, I decided to text Tony back. I said, "Leave now or I will call the police." Tony did not text me back. He kept knocking on the door on and off for a few more minutes. When this continued, I went ahead and called 911. I told them basically the whole story, and I was told that a police officer would be there in 5 to 10 minutes. After the police were on their way, I got another text from Tony demanding me to let him in the house now. I didn't respond. Then I heard what sounded like Tony running from the front of the house around to maybe the back. I didn't hear anything for a while afterwards. A short time later, the police officer arrived. I answered the door for him and spoke to him for a few minutes. It looked like Tony was gone, though. I showed the officer the texts, and he ended up searching in my backyard as well as the front and sides of my house. Tony was gone, but the officer told me not to hesitate to call if Tony caused me any more problems. I couldn't believe that Craigslist could be such a dangerous place. Sure, I had heard stories about it, but I didn't think it would actually happen to me. Not in my city. I had always considered it to be really safe. Plus, I was new to Craigslist and had never actually used it before. I guess I learned the hard way to be very careful while using it. The crazy thing was that I had never given Tony my address. I was going to, but hadn't done it yet. So about an hour after the officer left, it was now about 10:30 at night. I was in my bedroom now, but not asleep yet. I was just watching TV and laying in bed. That's when I heard glass breaking coming from the back side of the house. I knew instantly that Tony was back. Then my phone started ringing. Tony was calling me. I did not bother to answer it. I rejected the call and then blocked Tony's number. I ran to my bedroom door and locked it. Then I called the police once again. Tony was walking around at the other end of the house, near where he had broken in. I heard him yell something, but I couldn't tell what it was. I told the 911 dispatcher that Tony was back and he had broken in. I was told that officers would be there as soon as possible. I didn't know how long I could wait, though. I ran into my bedroom closet, which was small, but I could fit inside. I hid myself as best as I could. Tony made his way closer, over to my bedroom. Soon, he was right outside my bedroom door. He then yelled for me to let him in. He threatened to break the door down if I didn't. I yelled loudly that I had already called the police and they would be there any minute. Tony didn't reply, but pounded very loudly on my door several times. Then he walked away and seemingly charged back at my door to try to break it down. I heard the loud crashing of him running into my door, but luckily it did not break. If he got into my bedroom, it was probably only a matter of time before he would find me. He walked away again, but I didn't hear him for a while. I really wasn't sure where he went. Soon, there was a knocking at the front door of my house. It was the police, and at first I was afraid to leave my room, but eventually I was able to. I opened the door and I ran as fast as I could to the front door of my house and then let the officers in. This time, there were at least 5 police officers there. I let them in my house and I stayed outside with one of them. They were in my house for quite a while before finally coming out with Tony. He had been hiding inside, in the attic. This gave me chills when I heard it. He had gotten away the first time the police showed up, but luckily not the second. After this experience, I haven't used Craigslist since. A few years ago, I was in the market for a new car. By new car, I mean newer than the one that I was currently driving at the time. My car was over 20 years old and would occasionally break down. I finally had some money saved up and was looking for something a little bit better. I started looking around on Craigslist. This is where I had gotten my first car, and I knew that they had a lot of good deals. I was also familiar with the website and had been looking there for almost a month. I found a car that looked pretty good. It was cheap, sort of high miles, but lower than my current car. It was definitely an upgrade. I decided that I was serious about it, and I contacted the owner to look at it. It turned out that the owner was a small dealer in the local town, and he said that I could come and see the car the next day. So I went there, and it was a place that I had never seen before. It was sort of run down looking, and even a bit sketchy. The building was small, and the parking lot had areas of cracked concrete with weeds growing out of it. The place had 8 total cars for sale, none of which looked very appealing. Still, the prices were cheap. The building was small, but had 2 stories, and it looked very old. I walked up and tried going inside, but the door was locked, so I knocked on it. A short time later, a man opened the door and introduced himself to me as Terry. He shook my hand and asked me what car it was again that I was interested in. Terry had a mustache and wore a red hat. I would describe him as fitting in with the place nicely. I reminded him of the car that I was interested in and pointed it out on the lot a few feet away. We both walked over to it, and then Terry said, "Let's go get the paperwork." I was a little bit confused because I hadn't agreed to buy it yet or anything. Maybe he wanted us to test drive it, or maybe he didn't know the general information on the car. So we both went inside the building. When I got inside, I saw a small hallway and then a few doors. Then there was a staircase going upstairs. Terry told me to go upstairs, and that's where it was located. I walked up the narrow staircase, and as I reached the top, Terry stood there and showed me which room to go in. There were only 2 doorways at the top of the stairs in a tiny hallway. I started to walk into the room. There was nothing in it though. No desk, no paperwork. The windows had bars over them, and it just looked really creepy. I didn't want to go in. I suddenly said, "Actually, I really have to go to the bathroom right now. Do you have one I could use quick?" Terry paused for a few seconds before he answered. He then told me that he did have one downstairs, and told me to be quick. He said that he would show me where it was, and we both walked back down the stairs. When we got down, he showed me to a small room that was the bathroom. When I got inside, it was very small and dirty, but now I was away from Terry. I was still really creeped out though. Why did he want me to go in that room? As I was in the bathroom, I could tell that Terry was right outside the door, directly on the other side. This was also really suspicious. I just wanted to leave at this point. I no longer cared about buying that car. I went to leave the bathroom, and as soon as I started opening the door, it hit Terry, who was standing right outside of it. When it did, I quickly closed the door again. Then, I decided to just open the door really fast. The door opened onto Terry, and it pushed him back a little. It created a sort of wall between me and him. I ran out of the room and to the right. Then I ran straight for the door. I heard him yelling something at me, but I didn't stop to listen. Soon, I was out of the building and sprinting for my car. When I made it, I got inside and drove out of there. I got home, and when I looked, the Craigslist ad was deleted. I tried finding that car place on the map, but it was not showing up as a business. I really don't know what the deal with it was, but I never went back. This was the first and only time I ever used Craigslist. It was about 5 years ago. In the springtime, when the snow was all melted and the grass was starting to grow long again, I went to my garage to get the lawnmower. I had an old push mower, and it hadn't been used in months. When I wheeled it out of my garage, it wouldn't start. I couldn't figure out the problem, and after researching online with no luck, I realized I probably needed to buy a new one. The one I had was really old anyways, and it had had some problems in the past. My yard is not all that big, so I only needed another push mower, and I figured they wouldn't be too expensive to buy a used one. I went to Craigslist and searched in my local area for lawnmowers. After browsing for a little while, I found one that seemed to be the best deal. It was $100, and it seemed like a reasonable price to me. After some thought, I decided to reach out and let the seller know that I was interested in buying it. I texted the number that was on the listing and received a response about an hour later. The response said that if I wanted to buy the mower, I could come by and purchase it tomorrow night. I agreed, and I was then provided with an address and a time to pick it up, which was 8 p.m. This was a little later than I would have liked, but I agreed. The next night, I drove my small SUV to the address that I was sent, and I texted the seller letting them know that I was on my way. I got a text back saying, "Sounds good, the mower's in the garage, come right in." It took me almost 20 minutes to get there, and it was a little bit farther than I wanted. When I arrived, it seemed to be a pretty typical residential neighborhood. There were a bunch of houses along both sides of the street. I saw the address of the house that I was going to. The garage door was open, and I parked my car on the side of the street. I texted the seller that I had arrived. I waited in my car until I got a response. It took about a minute, but the seller said, "Come on up." I got out of my car, walked across the street, and then up the driveway. When I got inside the garage, it was not very well lit. There was just a dim light bulb in the middle. I looked around, and there was miscellaneous stuff that you would typically find in a garage, but there was no lawnmower. I took a few more steps in and called out, "Hey, I'm here." I didn't hear anything. I saw the normal step up to the door leading to the house, but then I saw another door. It was in the far back right corner, and this was a door that was open and seemingly leading into another hallway. I saw a piece of a cardboard box was propped up against the door, and written in marker it said, "Lawnmower," and then had an arrow pointing inside the door. I was a little confused by this, and it seemed a little bit sketchy, but I walked over to it. When I got to the doorway, things were pretty dark, and I couldn't see well, but I did see that there was a door to the right and then a staircase going straight down to seemingly a basement. The arrow was pointing down the stairs, so maybe this guy had his lawnmower in the basement for some reason. I started walking down the stairs to the basement area. When I made it to the bottom of the stairs, I could now see that the entire basement appeared to be unfinished, and the lighting wasn't much better in there either. Still, I didn't see a lawnmower. Then I heard noise coming from up the stairs. It was the door from the garage leading to the basement, and it was closing. It wasn't slammed or anything. It was closed relatively quietly, but I still heard it. I looked up the staircase, but didn't see anybody. Whoever had closed the door closed it from the outside. I suddenly had a really bad feeling, and I just wanted to leave. I walked back up the stairs as quickly as I could. As I was making it to the top of the stairs, I heard another door close, and then footsteps. Somebody else was in the house. It sounded like they had gone in the other door leading from the garage. I tried opening the door to the garage, but it was somehow locked from the outside. I couldn't open it. Then I tried the other door leading to inside the house. That one was already open a crack. When I made it inside the rest of the house, I saw that I was in some sort of hallway. It was small and led to a living room type of area that had a sliding glass door that went out to a back patio. I heard footsteps approaching from another room around the corner. Without hesitating, I went to the sliding glass door and opened it. Once outside, I shut it behind me, just in time to see a man coming into view inside the house. I didn't get a good look at him at all, but he was walking in my direction at a rather fast speed. I bolted out of there, sprinting all the way from the backyard to around the house and garage and all the way back to my car. When I made it inside my vehicle, I started the engine and immediately left. I drove all the way back home, and then I blocked the number just because I didn't want anything to do with that guy. I reported my experience on the Craigslist website and then decided to buy a new lawnmower from the store. Since then, I haven't used Craigslist. I'm not sure if I'll use it again sometime. Maybe things have changed. All I know is I will never forget that experience I had, and I hope to never have one like that again.
Last year, I broke my leg and was unable to do a lot of things that I typically do. I live alone in a smaller house, and my friends and family were really nice in helping me out when I first got the crutches. Soon after, though, I realized that I would have to do yard work, and I didn't want to ask family or friends to do it. Everybody in my neighborhood takes great pride in their yards. The lawns are all very green and trimmed often. There's generally nice flowers in most as well. I have a typical garden, just some basic flowers by the house, and then most of my front yard is just grass that I cut weekly. I decided to go on Craigslist to find somebody to keep up my yard for a few weeks until I would be able to again. There was only 3 weeks until I would be able to do yard work, and I didn't want to hire a company because I knew that would be really expensive. I found an ad on Craigslist that said, "Male just graduated from high school, looking to earn money doing odd jobs during summer." He even listed yard work in the ad, and I figured this would be a good person to go with. I contacted the kid, whose name was Michael. He responded saying that he was excited to have a job for a few weeks, and I told him he would come over once a week. The job would be cutting the grass and watering the flowers, also cutting down weeds if there were any, and picking up sticks in the yard. Probably would only take an hour or two each week. The next week, Michael arrived at my house, and I went outside to greet him. Right away, though, things seemed strange. Michael did not appear to be in high school at all. He had a full beard for starters, and I know some high schoolers can grow full beards, but he just didn't look 18 or 19, more like 29 or 30. Right away, I said to Michael that I thought he said he had just graduated high school. He looked confused for a moment, and then said that he looks a little older than he actually is. He admitted that he hadn't just graduated, but claimed he forgot to change his ad for a few years. More like 10 years, I thought. Still, he looked capable of doing the work, and he was already here, so I gave him the information that he needed, and he started working. I went inside and went over some work stuff. I was working part-time at home and part-time in the office at the time. Occasionally, I would glance out the window to see what Michael was doing. The first day went pretty well. He did all of the maintenance work in about an hour, and then I paid him, and he left. The next week was a bit different. There was the same amount of work to be done, if not less, but he was there for almost 3 hours. I wasn't quite sure why he took so long, because I wasn't paying him by the hour. But finally, he finished, I paid him, and he left. The next week, which was the last one, he was there for a lengthy amount of time again, and this time, I noticed him poking around some of the windows and areas of my house from the outside. I really didn't know what he was doing. Cleaning the windows was not part of the job. That's seemingly what he was doing, though. I was careful not to let him notice me when I watched him work, but seeing this was a little confusing. At last, he was done, and I paid him for the final time, and he left. I was glad to be done working with Michael. He was a little strange and definitely misrepresented himself. But that same night, at about midnight, I was still awake and on my phone in my bedroom. I'm a bit of a night owl, and I frequently stay up past midnight. I heard the sound of a window opening at the opposite end of my house. Immediately, I knew what was happening. I just knew it had to be Michael. Looking back, I could have been wrong, but I had more than a hunch. I didn't know what he wanted or what he was trying to do, but when I suddenly heard footsteps coming into the house, I knew I had to do something. I stepped out into my hallway, just a couple of steps. Then, I shouted as loud as I could that I knew it was Michael and I had a gun. I didn't have a gun, but I wanted to scare him off. It actually worked, and I heard footsteps moving back until I heard noises around the window again. I left my room and walked into the living room to see an open window. I went to the front of my house and saw what sure enough appeared to be Michael running out of the front yard and onto the street. I made sure that all of my windows and doors were closed, then I went back to bed. The next day, I went to the police with all of my information. It was not difficult at all for them to find Michael, because his ad was still on Craigslist. I'm glad I was awake that night when he tried breaking in, or I'm not sure what would have happened. Last year, I was selling my car. I had a 2015 Toyota Camry, but I recently started leasing a new car, and I didn't need the Camry anymore. I had bought the Camry on Craigslist and paid a good amount of money for it, so I wanted to get all that I could. When I listed it for about the top price that was still within reason. At first, the car didn't garner much attention. The ad was on Craigslist for probably 4 or 5 days before I was contacted. The first person that contacted me sent me a lowball offer, which I declined. The second person who texted me about the car said that they wanted to look at it and were seriously considering buying it. We texted back and forth for a bit. It was a man who told me his name was Rob. Rob told me that he worked really odd hours, and the only time he would be able to look at the car was late at night. He then asked if he could see it at 11 p.m. the next night. This seemed strange to me, but I understood that some people work strange hours and don't have much time. He told me that he was very serious about buying the car, and if he liked it, he would buy it that same night. He offered me slightly less for the car over text. It was a number that I was willing to accept, though. I thought about it for a few minutes, and then I agreed with him. I really wanted to sell the car, and I suggested that we meet at a nearby shopping center or something. Rob recommended a mall parking lot, and I agreed. I knew where it was, and it was maybe 10 minutes from my house. We agreed to meet at the east side of the parking lot, and the next night, before leaving, I called my brother who lives a few minutes away from me. Luckily, he said he would stay up in case I needed a ride back home to my apartment if I sold the car. I drove to the mall shortly after 11. When I arrived, the parking lot was completely empty and very quiet. There were a few lights here and there. It was kind of spooky being there at that time. I parked in a spot on the east side, just like we agreed, and I texted Rob that I was there. Rob texted me back saying that he was running a tad bit late because of work, but would be there soon. I stayed in my car, parked, and looked around the quiet parking lot. As I was looking, I noticed something on the ground. I squinted my eyes and looked closer. It appeared to be a dollar bill of some sort on the ground. I couldn't tell the amount, if it was a 1 or if it was 100, but it definitely looked like a dollar bill. I thought about getting out of my car to go grab it, but I just decided to drive closer to it for some reason. It was maybe 30 feet away, and there was a large garbage dumpster about 20 feet beyond the dollar bill. I put my car into gear and drove closer. When I pulled up near it, I saw that it was a $100 bill. I was just about to stop my car right there, get out, and grab it, but that's when I noticed something else. There was somebody hiding behind the dumpster, crouched down. They moved out of view and farther behind the dumpster right after I saw them. Something about this was too sketchy. I kept driving so that I could get a view of the person behind the dumpster, but they once again moved out of sight behind the other side of it. I parked in a nearby spot. I wanted to leave, but Rob wasn't there yet, so I decided to call him. But then I had a strange thought. I rolled down my window a little as I called Rob. It was completely quiet outside. When I called him, I just barely heard a phone ring, and it was coming from behind the dumpster. As soon as I heard it, I sped out of the parking lot. I got back on the street and drove home. Rob texted me, asking me where I went. I didn't respond to him, though. Instead, I blocked him. I know that was him doing some kind of setup to probably rob me. That $100 bill might have been real or fake, but whoever was hiding behind that dumpster was probably planning to jump me or something. I'm really glad I didn't fall for it.
A couple of years ago, I responded to a Craigslist ad for a TV. I was in the market for a new one after mine broke, and unfortunately, I hadn't gotten the warranty for it. I searched on Craigslist because I figured that's where the best deals would be. People on Craigslist are generally just trying to get rid of stuff, and will sell it somewhere else if they want more money. That's what I was thinking, so after searching for a while, I found a TV that looked good. It was 55 inches, relatively new, and was a good price. Not so cheap that it looked like a scam, but cheap enough that it was a really good deal. I saw that it was a new listing, and I decided to contact the seller immediately so that nobody else would get it before I had a chance to. The seller responded to me rather quickly, and I asked to look at the TV. I had the money and was prepared to buy it as long as it worked and everything, but my main problem was how I would bring it back to my place. My car was really small, and there was no way I was going to fit it in there. My buddy Danny had a truck that it would fit in, so I texted him and asked him if he would help me out. Meanwhile, I was told that I would be able to see the TV that day at 3 p.m., and I agreed to go see it. My hope was that Danny would be able to possibly meet me there with his truck, but a few minutes later, he wasn't responding to my text. I had to leave, and I drove to the location I was given to. It was about 15 minutes away from where I lived. I got to the neighborhood, which looked pretty average to me. It was a residential area that was a little bit out in the country, but not too much. Most houses were decently spread apart with larger yards and a decent amount of trees around. I arrived at the address and parked on the side of the street in front of it. It was a nice-looking house with a long driveway. They had some nice decorations outside and a garden in the front yard. I texted the seller letting him know that I was there, and he told me to come up to the front door. I got out of my car and walked up the driveway, then knocked on the front door. A man answered and said his name was Dave. Dave had gray hair and a gray goatee. He was maybe in his 50s or 60s. He told me he was selling the TV because his son gave him one, and he just wanted to get rid of this one now because he didn't need it. He then told me that he had some other people interested, so he hoped I would be able to buy it. After I saw the TV sitting in his living room and we turned it on,
I told him yes, I would like to buy it, but I wouldn't be able to drive it to my place. I explained how I texted my friend, and then I checked to see if Danny had gotten back to me. He had, but he said he wouldn't be able to help me until tonight. I asked the man if there was any chance he would be able to hold the TV for me just until 8 p.m. when I would be back. I was surprised, but the man agreed, but he said he wouldn't hold it any longer. I left and went back home, and when Danny came by with his truck that night, I texted Dave, the seller, and he said it was fine for me to come and buy the TV now. Danny and I drove back to Dave's place, now at nighttime. When we arrived at the neighborhood and made our way to the address, I got confused. Dave's house looked different. All of the lights were off, the yard decorations were gone, and even the flowers were gone. It looked as though it was a completely different place than a few hours earlier. Danny shut his engine off and had already gotten out of the truck. I got out and told him to wait because it just didn't look right. Danny was confused and asked why as he began to walk up the driveway. I told him how it looked like nobody lived there now, and he did agree that it seemed creepy. I called Dave to let him know that I was there now, but after I called him, there was no answer. I texted him as well, but I couldn't get a response. We got back in the truck and sat in there waiting for about 15 minutes, but I didn't get any responses from Dave. I figured maybe he sold it to somebody else after all or something, and we decided we should just go back home. I was frustrated, and I was also really weirded out by the whole situation. That night, I was awoken in the middle of the night to my phone ringing. I picked it up and saw that Dave was calling me. It was almost 4 a.m. I decided to answer it because I was really curious why he was calling me now. When I picked up, I could hear Dave's voice start to speak, but I couldn't make out anything that he was saying. He then began to laugh like a maniac, and it really gave me the creeps. His laughing got louder and louder, and then he hung up. It took me a while to get back to sleep, but I was so creeped out by the whole situation that the next day I drove all the way back to the neighborhood. I knocked on Dave's door, but nobody answered. The house still looked abandoned, so I went to the neighbor across the street and knocked on his door and asked him if he knew the guy who lived there. He told me that nobody currently lived in that house and hadn't for a couple of weeks. After learning this, I went back to Craigslist and found that the listing had been deleted. I also looked at my phone and tried to call and text Dave again, but my number was now blocked. I'm a young woman, and last fall, I tried to sell my car using Craigslist. I live by myself in a small house in a pretty typical neighborhood. My car was a 2017 Honda Civic, and I was going to be buying a little bit newer car. I placed the ad on Craigslist and waited to get some responses. The first person to respond was a man named Mike. Mike texted me asking if the car was still for sale and said that he was very interested in it. I told him yes and asked if he would like to come and see it. He told me that he would, and we arranged for him to come over to my house the next day. After we both got off work, the next evening I got home and took the car out of my garage and parked it at the end of the driveway. Mike arrived a little bit later at the agreed time, and I met him at the end of the driveway near the car. Almost immediately, things went horrible. Mike looked at the car for the first minute or so, but then he became a total creep. He started trying to hit on me and made uncomfortable conversation. He no longer seemed interested in the car, but only with me. It got really uncomfortable and really annoying, and I wasn't going to take any more of it, and I told Mike that I wanted him to leave. Mike started to get angry, and he said that he wanted to buy my car and told me I was being rude to him for no reason. After trying to get him to leave me alone for several more minutes, I threatened to call the police. This finally got Mike to leave me alone. He angrily stormed off and got back into his car and drove away. I was really glad that he was gone. He really creeped me out, and something about him just seemed a little bit off. I brought my car back in the garage and went inside. It was later that night when I started receiving texts from him. He asked me if he could see the car again, but then started texting me the same weird and creepy things that he was saying to me in person. After probably 4 or 5 texts from Mike that night, all in the span of about an hour, I blocked his number, and then I replied to 1 or 2 people that were actually interested in my car for sale. I was in my bedroom on my laptop doing this, and it was about 11 p.m. or so. That's when I heard a knock coming from my bedroom window directly to my left. I was startled and looked over to see Mike looking right in my bedroom window at me. He was knocking on the window, and I couldn't make out much in the dark other than I knew it was Mike for sure. I jumped back and literally hid behind the other side of my bed when I saw him. He was now messing around with the window as if he was trying to open it. I yelled loudly that I was calling the police. I heard Mike yell back that he didn't care, and then he disappeared from the window. I took my phone and dialed 911 immediately. I stayed on with the operator while I waited for the police to arrive. I had no idea if Mike had left or where he was until about a minute later when I heard a banging noise now coming from the back side of my house. I couldn't tell exactly where he was, but I wasn't going to go and find out. The police would be there shortly, and I was just hoping that Mike wouldn't get inside of my house. It wasn't a very big house, it was pretty small, and if he got inside, it wouldn't take him long to find me. I heard the banging now move to a different spot, but I still didn't know exactly where he was. It paused for about a minute or two, but then it picked back up again. And then, all of a sudden, I heard the terrifying sound of glass breaking coming from somewhere in the opposite side of my house. I ran and hid inside my closet in the corner of my bedroom. I was hoping that Mike wouldn't be able to get to me. And then, just in time, I heard the sound of a siren coming from right down the street. I remained hidden in the closet and listened to what was going on. I didn't hear much movement from inside the house, but within a minute, I started to hear some yelling coming from the front door. The police had arrived, and I felt much safer. I left my room after an officer came to my door, and I was told that they had caught Mike. One thing I learned from this experience is to never meet with people from Craigslist at your home, and instead choose a public place. However, I have stayed away from Craigslist altogether since, and I sold my car somewhere else. This story took place last fall. At the time, I had just recently moved to a house for college. I was living with 3 different roommates, and none of us had much furniture. We had some things for our own bedrooms, such as desks, chairs, and our beds, but we didn't have couches and things like that. I decided to look on Craigslist for some couches and other chairs we could use in our living room. I didn't have much money to spend, but we still wanted some decent furniture in our house. After searching for about 10 minutes, I was able to find one that looked to be a pretty good couch for us to use. We didn't need or want anything that nice, knowing that we would probably just get rid of it when we all moved out of the house. The couch that I found only costed $50, and after showing it to my roommates, we all agreed to go buy it. I contacted the seller, who was at the other end of town, but said that whenever we wanted to come and buy it, we could. So that night, my roommate Ben and I both went in my car and drove to buy the couch. It took us only about 15 minutes to get there, because like I said, it was all the way at the other end of town. When we arrived at the address, Ben and I got out of the car and walked up to the house. We were in a neighborhood that honestly didn't look the greatest, and in fact seemed a little bit sketchy. It was only about 9 p.m., but nobody else seemed to be out on any of the roads at the time. When we got up to the house, we knocked on the door. It opened up, and a man stood in the doorway. He was very tall and thin, had blondish hair, and asked what we wanted. I told him we were there for the couch. He then asked for $20, which was strange because it was listed at $50 online. I wasn't going to question it though, and I handed him the money. I could see that the couch was already right up against the wall near the front door, and the man then pointed to it as he walked away. Ben and I each grabbed one end of the couch, and then walked out the door and put it into the back of my truck. Then we got in and drove back. I drove, and when we had made it all the way back to our house and gotten onto our street, Ben told me that we were being followed. I had no idea that somebody had been following us, but now that I looked back, there was a car with its headlights on a ways down the street. I said it's probably just a neighbor, but Ben said it had followed us all the way from the neighborhood where we had bought the couch. I parked anyways, right in front of our house. I really wasn't scared of some random person following us for whatever reason, and they weren't getting out of their car, whoever they were. Plus, there was a chance that maybe it was just a neighbor, although those chances seemed pretty slim. The car was at least a good 100 feet back though, and we brought the couch inside and put it into place in our living room. It was then that we noticed out of the front window that the car that had followed us was now idling right in front of our house. We both went to the window and looked. We did have window shades, but they were all the way open at the time, and I'm pretty sure whoever was in the car could see us well. However, we couldn't really see the driver of the car at all. After watching the car for a good minute or so, I decided to go out and see who they were and what they wanted. I opened the door and stepped outside, but the instant I did, the car sped away, screeching its tires and all. I went back inside, and Ben and I tried to figure out what that was all about. But at the end of the day, we didn't know, and they hadn't done anything, so we really didn't care all that much. Over the next few days, things were normal and fine, but then things started to get strange again. One morning, one of my other roommates, Brian, reported seeing a man standing in our backyard sort of near his window. All of our bedrooms were on the second floor, so Brian could see him, but the guy wasn't facing him, so he couldn't identify how he looked. Brian said he thought it was weird, but ultimately just went back to bed. Then, the next night, as we were all watching TV in the living room, the window shades were partially closed, but I noticed what appeared to be two men walking through our front yard. I went over and looked out and saw them go past to the side of the house. After that, they went out of sight, but all of us living there would continue to see random people in the yard or cars driving and stopping in front of the house randomly. This went on for about a week or two, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. After that, none of us ever noticed anything like that again. It was really bizarre, and I still don't have answers.
Last summer, I went on Craigslist to look for a car. I'd been driving a pretty old car for the last 2 years, and when it started to have problems, I took it to a mechanic to find out it needed quite a few repairs, and at that point, it just wasn't worth it. I sold the car for what I could get for it, and luckily, I had some money saved up. In the past, I'd always bought my cars on Craigslist. I got them used from other people, and was able to get some pretty good deals that way. I was looking for another used car, but obviously something newer and more reliable than my previous one. After a few days of looking and borrowing one of my parents' old cars, I found one that I thought was really nice and was a good deal. It was a 2010 Subaru Forester, listed for a very reasonable price. I knew these cars sold really fast, and I saw it was a new listing, so I responded to it immediately. I reached out to the seller, and I figured a lot of people would do the same. I asked if I could take a look at the car as soon as possible. The seller then contacted me a short time later and said that he could show me the car that night after he got off work. He offered to meet in a grocery store parking lot by his house. When the time came, at around 8 p.m., the man said that he would be at the location in an hour. I drove to the address that he sent me and got there a few minutes early. It was a grocery store parking lot that was pretty big, but the store was closed and the parking lot was completely empty besides me. I texted the seller telling him that I was there. He responded that he would be there within 5 minutes. A short time later, I saw a car pull into the parking lot, but it wasn't a Subaru Forester. Instead, it just looked like an average white car. I figured it was someone else, until the car parked just a few spaces away from me. I then saw a guy get out of the car who appeared to be on the younger side. He walked towards my car. I opened my door and got out. The man reached out his hand to me and said his name was Al. I introduced myself back to him. He then asked me if I would like to see the car. I looked at what appeared to be a white Ford Fusion, which was nothing like the green Subaru Forester I had planned to look at. I told the man I thought he was selling a Subaru Forester. The man looked at me for a few seconds and then started laughing a nervous laugh. He then apologized and told me this was another car that he was selling and had just got his appointments mixed up. He then pulled out his phone and started looking through it. As he was doing this, I saw out of the corner of my eye in the backseat of his car someone's head slowly creep up. I only saw the top half of their head, and their eyes looked at me before the head quickly ducked back down. I found this strange, as if someone was hiding in the back from me. Although I only saw the top half of the person's head, it appeared to be a grown man. As Al kept looking at his phone, I asked him who was in his car. He told me nobody was, and he had come alone. I told him it looked like someone was in the backseat of his car. Al then interrupted me and said he saw now that I had responded to his ad for a Subaru Forester and not the Ford Fusion. He then apologized for getting them confused. I asked him if he was a dealer, but he said no, he just had a couple of cars for sale at the moment. By this time, I was feeling sort of weirded out, and being in a quiet parking lot at night didn't help. Al then asked me if I was interested in looking at the Ford Fusion anyways. He started trying to sell me on the car, saying that he would give me a great deal and that I could even test drive it. It really wasn't what I was looking for though, and I told him no thanks. I then told Al once again that I was sure I saw someone in his back seat. Al then walked over to his car and got inside. I saw him look in the back, and then he rolled down his passenger window and said to me, "Nobody's in there." Then he drove away without saying another word. I then got back into my car and drove home. After getting home, I realized just how weird of a situation it was. Al seemed really suspicious to me, like he was hiding something, and I didn't know what was going on. When I went to look at the Craigslist listing again, it was gone.
The next day, I decided to report the whole encounter to Craigslist. To this day, I don't know who the guy in the backseat of the car was. If it was some sort of setup to rob me or something like that, I don't know. But the fact that the Al guy seemed to have multiple listings scares me and makes me think if he was planning to rob me or something, he was going to do it to multiple people. A couple of months ago, I decided to sell my TV on Craigslist. I had just gotten a new 65-inch TV and had a 55-inch one that I had previously used. Nothing was wrong with it. It was just a few years old and smaller than my new one. I didn't really have the space to keep it in my house, with it being rather large, and I thought I could sell it. I had never used Craigslist before, but thought it would be the best option for me in the area where I lived. When I listed the TV, it only took a couple of hours before I got a response. I got a text from a man introducing himself as Jim, saying he was interested in the TV and would like to buy it. He then asked me what times I was available and told me he could look at it that afternoon. I said that would work and sent the man my address. I had the TV in my living room, which was basically right inside the front door of my house. It was standing on the floor, sort of near the front door, but I had it plugged into an outlet to show that it worked. The man arrived right on time and texted me that he was there. I looked out and saw a blue car parked on the street in front of my house. The man got out and began walking up. I walked out the front door and greeted him. He looked to be mid-20s and had very short blonde hair. We both went inside my house and the man looked around. I showed him the TV just as it was in the Craigslist photos and turned it on to show the man that it worked. I was hoping that he would not give me a super low offer, but I was willing to negotiate a little bit. The man examined the TV for a few minutes and then looked at it from several different angles. He then said to me that he really wasn't sure if he could afford it and told me to take care. After that, he walked out of my front door and left. I was sort of annoyed by this because the man had clearly seen the price online and didn't give me any sort of offer. Still, I figured I would be able to sell the TV and waited for more people to contact me about it. For the rest of the day, I got 2 more texts from people with questions about the TV, and one of them seemed interested. Later that night, I was watching TV on my new larger TV and sort of starting to doze off when I heard something. It sounded like a noise coming from the window in the hallway on the other side of the living room. I glanced over from my chair and didn't see anything, and the noise stopped shortly after, so I went back to watching TV. The TV volume was pretty loud, and as I started to hear a noise again about 20 minutes later, I turned the volume down. This time, I heard again from the window another noise. I really couldn't tell what type of noise it was, or make out the exact sound. I looked over again, but this time I saw something. My window was slid up a good 3 feet, and I saw someone's hand in it from the outside. I was frozen in fear, it seemed, or maybe I was just in disbelief, but I didn't move or say anything. I watched as a man climbed through the window, which was roughly 20 feet away from me. All the lights were off in the house, and the only light was coming from the TV, so I had no idea who it was at first. But then, when the person was fully inside the house, I could see that it was Al, the man who had looked at my TV for sale earlier that day. As soon as he got inside, he looked to the light which was coming from the TV. Then he noticed me. He seemed really surprised to see me at first. Then he demanded my wallet and phone. I was worried to give him my phone because then I couldn't call the police or anything. I handed it over to him and told him my wallet was in the bedroom, which it actually was. He asked me where the bedroom was, and I told him. He told me not to move at all, and he backed away facing me towards my bedroom. He didn't appear to have a weapon or anything, but I wasn't going to risk it. I told him I wouldn't move, and Al then asked me where in the bedroom my wallet was located. I told him it was on my nightstand, and then I watched him go into the room and turn the lights on. That's when something in me just decided to run. I ran to the kitchen, which was in the opposite direction, and then quickly opened the sliding glass door which led to the backyard. From there, I ran as fast as I could to a neighbor's house who I was friendly with. I pounded on their door for a good 20 seconds before they opened up and let me inside. From there, I used their phone to call the police. When the police arrived, Al was long gone, but I was able to give them a decent amount of information on him. He had stolen my wallet, phone, and TV I had for sale, as well as a couple of other valuable items I had. As a lesson from this, I would recommend anyone selling on Craigslist should not give out their address, but instead meet in some sort of public location.